kind of stuff interests me because my philosophy with filmmaking is what are the tools of filmmaking and how do you use them? Like, I think a lot of people look at filmmaking as essentially a storytelling medium. And I think you can tell stories with cinema. Right. And I like to tell stories with cinema. But it doesn't end there for me.
Do you feel like most people put you in a box then you're art house because you just...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think enough people have seen, like the last film we made was in 2012.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, I feel like that's the same box that people put games in. It's like games are
for sure.
I would say
that people put movies in general in that box.
Like narrative box. Like tell a story. Tell me a fun story.
Yeah, well, it's just entertainment.
Dance for me, clown. It's like
yeah.
That's what we're all asking.
Right.
We turn on.
I want to be entertained.
Yes.
And there seems to be this idea that you can't think and be entertained.
That fucking kills me.
Yeah.
Like, why? Like, no one wants to think. Like, that made me think too much. Like, I get a lot of those conversations.
Yeah, it made me uncomfortable. Or it's like, that doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think
my fiance will always ask me, why would you want to watch this? Why would you want to see that? That doesn't make me happy. I don't watch narratives to always be happy.
Well, it's why we watch, again, going back to noir. It's why we watch noir, because we want to dip our toe. We want to open the door to that nihilistic world and see what's there.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, when it comes right down to it, there's a very, very strong... I have a very strong or very deep sense that people sort of blend storytelling with real life too much. Mm-hmm. And they kind of use the simplicity and the thematics of storytelling to shine a light on real life. And I don't necessarily think they fit because real life is chaotic and messy. Right. And what we do with stories is we make... It's like Jurassic Park with the flea. It's the flea circus. We try to make sense of chaotic reality. We try to give it a godlike through line. Right. Life doesn't always have that through line.
Every now and then, though, it does. Every now and then, you do see it though.
You do.
It's
every once in a while
when it does happen.
Right.
But
it's cool.
Right.
It's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what we're looking for in stories is that sense of like unity and thematics. You know. But yeah, to me,
and I don't always look for that. I feel like that's why the best horror, not to get on horror, we're in Halloween, we're in October now, but I always tell people the best horror stories don't explain anything to me. Yeah. Leave me hanging.
Well, this is
because the scariest things in life I don't understand.
I think we talked about this a couple of years ago. My problem with a lot of the horror films now is that, first act, second act, they've got me, and I'm scared. This is fucking creepy. And then the third act, they explain everything like it's a science fiction movie, and then I'm like not scared anymore.
So it was a demon from the 1900s. It was in Roanoke when the people died. And, oh my god!
And what's so great about the first Paranormal Activity to me, which is one of the scariest things I've ever seen, is that they do explain where that thing comes from, but what's not explained, the way they do in like a movie where it's a ghost or whatever. It's trying to get revenge.
Yeah, no.
It's a demon. There's no other motivation that you need.
No.
It's just malevolent.
Yes.
That's terrifying.
So here's what I will argue, and I will argue that is one of the greatest horror films of all time, is both Ringu, the original, and the American version of Ring. I don't know how you feel, but what I love about that movie is because the American version, I even like the American version more than I like the Japanese version, because I'm used to the Japanese aesthetic, and I'm used to knowing that they're not going to take me where I expect to go. Yeah. So when I watch Ring, most movies at that time
sort of like North
would be
American
like, here we go. The little girl really isn't malevolent. She just wants to be set free. Right. She's doing scary things.
That's the explanation I'm talking about. That's the explanation.
Ring goes through that, and then there's this chilling moment. People always, whenever I ask people, what's your scariest moment of the Ring? And they go, oh, this scene and that scene. And they're all right. But for me, it's the moment when she goes home and she wakes up her son and she goes, hey. And she goes, hey, did you... She goes, da-da-da. She goes, it's okay. The little girl's fine. We set her free. He goes, you did what? Right. And his eyes get big.
Yeah, it's terrifying. That moment is one of the craziest moments.
She never sleeps. Right. And you go, oh! And they don't go back and show you a ton of shots from before. You just get the feeling of dread, like she's fucking evil the entire time.
Yeah, that moment is one of the most chilling moments.
She never sleeps.
Yeah. That's great.
So I love that movie. That's what I was like. And then she just She just kills the guy at the end, and just because, that's what she does, and there's no explanation after that. And I thought by going in the well and finding her, and what's cool about the movie is she thinks that by going in the well, she saves herself, but she saved herself because she copied it and showed it to her friend.
Yeah.
And then she realizes she has to go through the same process and create this terrible chain letter of this demonic chain letter. It's great. I don't know, but but yeah, man, this is all good. So now, Blade Runner 2049. Let's just get into it. Yeah.
Well, I think there's something along the lines of what you were just talking about. Mm-hmm. So if you take the idea, so one argument that I had with someone recently was that when we were talking about Blade Runner 2049,
right? Their
argument was, well, you're just looking for the Goldilocks zone. And my argument to them was, isn't that what you're looking? Isn't that where the good movies reside?
Not always.
Well,
yeah, okay. But
I agree. The Goldilocks zone, in terms of they nailed what they were going for.
True.
My problem with Blade Runner 2049, and just with a lot of movies that I think have potential, but I don't really like, they're going for something.
And you don't feel like they hit the nail on the head.
No. And, I have very specific... I can't know right now how many drafts that script was in. Yeah. But what I can tell you about the original film and why it's one of the reasons.
I would say you're nailed, though, as Brad Champagne is, when we come talk about movies, is probably very small. And your hammer is just as... if you're the guy that's let's see if they can hit this nail. Yeah. All right, I'm going to give you a hammer about this big.
I don't agree with that. You need to... If I only liked one type of movie...
I think I gave them a bigger nail, and I was like, I drove it in.
I think if I only liked one type of movie, you'd be right.
I know, I'm giving you shit.
But no, I would say that... like I said, I can't really know how many drafts that script was, how far along they were. But one of the magical things about the first movie is, and this to me is really what old Hollywood was really good at, which was you had producers like Alan Ladd Jr.
They actually, besides the casting couch?
Yeah. So this, yeah, not Harvey Weinstein.
I just want to throw it there and see how long you were going to go before you're like, oh, no, no, that's not me.
Come on, this is the way we do things here.
Okay.
Imagine if Tarantino was a producer. He's like, suck my toes, man. Go ahead, do it.
Jesus, we don't know what.
If you have to suck a toe.
But what's funny, though, I think that's what people always have always harped on people like Tarantino, and though he's getting shit right now because he didn't talk. He said he knew more about Weinstein. The thing I love about Tarantino is I think that the worst people are the people that... I think that some of the people that we think might be the worst people in real life are not because they explore the worst aspects of their humanity through their storytelling. Mm-hmm. So me, people go, why do you like horror movies? I can't hurt a fly. I'm the guy that feels bad when I kill... Literally, if I'm forced to kill something, I'm like, hey, I had to kill it. It's a bug. But I think about the fact that it was a bug and it was alive. Right. People think that's being hippie and weird, but I think that, but at the same time, the way I think when I start writing stories, you would think I was a fucking creep because I can get very, very dark, and I think those are the people I would like to hope to think that maybe Quentin's not that as creep because he explores his humanity, so he gets it all out. Outlet. It's the people that don't outlet. They always say about people that write horror stories, and you would think they would be the most demented, dark, depraved people, but a lot of times they're just getting it out. Yeah. So they never have to resort to that in real life. They're not. Right. I don't think Stephen King is that guy, but think about the kind of concepts as much as we love him as an artist, the kind of concepts as an author that he's had to explore. Yeah. You would think the dude has to just be off.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Again, to me, it's the separation between the storytelling and real life.
Right.
That's why.
But isn't that line blurred sometimes? When you have to, do we question whether that line blurs sometimes when you have to go because I think actors a lot of times blur their storylines.
Sure. But that's where it comes down to: are you a stable person?
Right.
It's the whole. What were they saying in the '90s about video games? Oh, they're so violent. They're gonna make kids go out and kill people. They never did. Some people the stats don't back it up. Yeah. It's an outlet.
Dungeons and Dragons. I grew up all my life. I
couldn't
play it for a long time because
it's just.
I grew up very,
But that's the problem. I think you do have a segment of the population who can't separate the fantasy from the reality. Yeah. And that's a defect. Yeah. But, that's just, you have to be able to imagine crazy things. And takes us back to the unicorn.
Yeah.
But
so Blade Runner doesn't get this down the head.
So what Hollywood used to be able to do, you had producers who they weren't creative people, but they could recognize creative people. And they knew real talent when they saw it. The cigar chomping, like, you're a good kid. That kind of thing. Alan Ladd Jr. is the one I always think of because he produced American Graffiti, Star Wars, Alien. This guy knew talent.
Right.
And his dad was an actor. His dad was in Shane. He grew up around the industry, great producer. And what they knew also was this script isn't done. They knew. And when you watch the behind the scenes, when you watch the making of Blade Runner on the Final Cut Blu-ray, Dangerous Days, they talk about how Hampton Fancher would do a draft, they'd read it and they'd be like, oh, there's something here. This is interesting. It's not there yet. Same thing over and over. Bring in another writer. Maybe we need other eyes on this thing. Look at Back to the Future. I think that script had something like 7 or 8 drafts. Wow. This is it goes back to what I was talking about with graphic design. Okay. You've got to keep it in development until it's ready. And I'm, the way I work, and we can go into a little bit of this, like the way I work when I make my films is very much more like Wong Kar-wai or Godard. I don't like to sit down and write a whole script.
No, you take your
I kind of just go into it, start shooting, and there's a whole philosophy around that. But if you are going to tell the story of Jurassic Park or Terminator 2, you've got to sit down and write that script. It's got to be tight, right?
Because you're more experimental where you're just like letting the character almost evolve. Yeah. But if you've got to tell
the movies that we're talking, and that's what's interesting about Blade Runner 2049, and I actually said this before it came out.
Okay.
Which was, if this movie is going to be different enough from the first one so that it doesn't seem like just it's aping it, and it feels more like its own thing, it should be more narrative, right? I think they went in that direction.
Okay.
I just don't think that they developed the ideas they had into a compelling narrative. I think there's a bunch of pieces that are kind of cobbled together on top of that movie, and what's kind of taken me through it is the music's great, the acting's good, and the directing's very good.
So why can't it just be good then?
But it's because there's one...
If there's movies that don't completely follow this narrative fully...
Because when you commit to something, you got to stick the landing.
Okay.
If I say to you, I'm going to make Chungking Express, and it's going to have like 4 different storylines, and you have all these different characters overlapping, and I'm not going to be beholden necessarily to like typical 3-act structure.
Right.
There's cops in it, but they never shoot anybody. I'm committing to that, and I'm going to tell a story with cops and criminals and the girl next door, and I'm going to tell it in a certain way, and I'm committing to that. If you tell me I'm going to make a gangster movie, and the guy's going to have to go put a hit on somebody, and you've got to commit to that. And my problem with films like Blade Runner 2049 is that they say, this is going to be more narrative. But when you get down to the script level, the script isn't finished. It's not there yet. It's got great ideas, but they're just not developed. So, my problem with the hologram girl, this AI, that's a whole, like I said, that's a whole movie in and of itself.
Yeah.
Even if, so let's say it's not a whole movie. Let's say, but I really want to work it into this Blade Runner 2049 sequel, right? Then I'd look at that and I'd say, okay, you gotta either make that, it goes this direction, make it the whole movie, or you go this direction. It's there, and it's kind of there in the background, but it's not taking up entire scenes.
Feeling like Kanye right now. You ain't got the answers, Sway. You ain't got the answers. No, but yeah, I hear.
But my point is this. It unfortunately, you can't just take pizza from the fridge and last night's Chinese food and an orange and some paprika.
Right.
Put them all on one plate, and that's a meal.
So did you feel...
You can shove that food down your gullet.
Okay.
And at the end, you're like, wow, that orange tasted pretty good.
That means I must really like that kind of that means I like going in the cupboard. And you know what's funny? I am that type of person. I pull shit out. I'm like, how can I make this shit that's laying on the plate work? I just made a new meal.
Right, but this is my point. you might even actually be able to take those elements and blend them together into some new concoction, right?
Yeah.
Totally doable.
Right.
Blade Runner 1 is that. It's noir, it's cyberpunk,
So
it's
why
all
can't
these...
Blade Runner 2
Because
do that?
2049 is all of those meal pieces separated, though. They're like the Hungry Man's meal, where they each have their own little
Did you
drop.
feel like like a Hungry Man's meal?
They're not blended together.
You felt yourself constantly... Did you
I
feel
felt
yourself
like I was
constantly
watching
coming out of the movie?
different movies.
And you felt that while you were watching it?
Yeah.
You didn't analyze that after. You felt that while you were watching it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because, one really good example of this to me is you have these replicants show up and that moment that you were talking about, which had this emotional impact for you. And I think, again, sort of divorced by itself.
Yeah.
That's a good scene, but it's a whole idea.
Right.
It's that scene is like the whole movie Akira.
But the movie... See, here... So
it's got little doorways to other movies in it.
What I like is those little doorways
not,
is because, to me, that's kind of... For me, they're letting you a little bit in on the world building as the world as a whole. But those little things, like somebody was telling you about, like, let's talk about the Joy character, they're telling you something about the main character. So maybe that... For me, that character, while it could be a whole different arc in itself in another movie, we're learning a lot even about his character that's very stoic and very, even less emotive and less like whimsical than Harrison Ford's character. We're playing a guy that's almost a robot at the beginning of the movie. So it's the people around him that tell us about who he is. It's even, I even learn about the K through his boss.
Right, see, but this is the problem. Okay, so, there's that old saying, show, don't tell.
Okay.
There's a version of that in dialogue as well.
Okay.
No one's ever said it. It's just my own philosophy, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
Show, don't tell. And it's the idea of, and this is my problem with a lot of dialogue in modern films, is that it's overwritten. Cinema is not a novel. You don't need to explain these things, right?
Is there a lot in this movie?
Yes. And my problem with it is that the idea of this sort of replicant class that are rebellious and breaking free. Fantastic idea in the background, though.
Okay. That was my least favorite idea of this movie. I felt like I was watching Matrix at that point.
My point is, less is more.
Yeah.
This is the problem, though, and this is where we get into the Goldilocks zone. And this is where, for me, I think my training in graphic design school really helped me.
Yeah.
Because it made me critical. I'm sure you know, like going to art school, we would take our work, put it up on a board, and everyone would tear it apart.
Tear that shit up.
Right.
Art. You'd be like, I did a good job.
Right.
You put it up and it's like,
and you get it. It's critically analyzed. But nowadays, with the modern film industry, they set a release date before they even have a script.
I agree.
My point is that this movie,
you're Joe Budden.
Who?
You're literally Joe Budden of the movie world. Like, I'm just starting to realize Joe Budden is a popular now because of his podcast, but he's the rapper that had the hit song "Pump It Up" with Too Fast and Furious. So Joe Budden is always very critical of the industry of the hip hop industry, of like what it takes to be an artist and stuff like that, and he's very. I'm saying it as a joke, but just to explain to you, he really does love the craft, and so he is always shitting on like he can pick anything apart and he can tell you if it's not true to the core. And so I was just joking, being like, "You're
I know when I talk to people who just I have the same sort of reaction to music where. Like,
I'm not mad at anything.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like,
makes a lot of sense. I'm actually mad that I'm not more upset.
People who love music and know pop music and everything, they know what to listen for. Okay. I just know what sounds good.
Just know what you like.
Yeah,
right?
But with movies, because I'm passionate about it, and I've studied them. Yeah.
So that's
so my here's my point though. So ultimately, my point is that yes, anything that you set out to do, right? There is a Goldilocks zone. There is a point at which, we achieved that concept.
Right.
And I don't think this movie achieved any one concept.
And let me tell you now why I think it did. Because, like you said, like there's people, and you probably shit on them, you go, oh, this, like, it's like when I hear that young kid and they're listening to fucking the new shit, and I'm like, they don't know shit about real music, because I listen to everything, but I know, and I'm not even a music person, but I feel like I can know when I hear something good.
Yeah.
But I can still actually pick, I think, pretty much a song that might be very poppy and be like, it's still a good pop song. Right. So, I don't know, I guess I can try to relate that to the fact of how this movie made me feel. And how movies make me feel is everything, for me.
Yeah.
A movie could be, I can later on look on it and be like, that wasn't that great of a movie. It wasn't written that well, I can pick it apart. But how it made me feel is amazing. So, for example, best probably example is Fast and Furious, the first Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty good movie. People give it a lot of shit because of where the franchise has gone. But that movie's actually, it's pretty much Point Break. And Point Break was a decent movie for an action standpoint. Yeah, there's
a very strong concept.
Very strong concept.
Yeah. Very simplified concept.
And when you watch it, you go, you know that you're, even when I go back, I know that I'm watching a decent film, but I said, regardless of all the problems that people may pick it apart or just say it's just a candy action film or whatever it may be, or popcorn throwaway, the way it made me feel at the time, that's why I wonder how much nostalgia makes us love things, because I still hold that movie to a high regard. I'm not going to put it in and be like, yeah, it's up there with, Steven Spielberg's best, but I will say that when I watched Blade Runner 2049, it made me feel from the opening shots. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, first of all, I guess I'll get superficial first. From the superficial standpoint, and I think superficiality goes a long way because we are watching a visual visual storytelling. And so if the visuals aren't good, you have some movies that work when the visuals aren't good, but this is one of those movies where I feel like the visuals are going to be very important.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it's because when I see things also in IMAX and just the screen is almost 3 stories tall and the sound is just rumbling the movie theater. But I tell people like that when I go see an action movie normally, and when I go see a movie, the average movie that I go see in IMAX, right? It's a Michael Bay film. It's like we're going to take everybody in the movie theater and we're going to take them on a ride. So they feel like it needs to be this Disneyland ride for fucking 2.5 hours. Well, the average Transformers movie is 2.5 hours. So I'll compare it.
It's ridiculous.
And it's like we're going to shake the movie theater.
Yeah.
And then, but this movie, I felt like what it was doing is and here's the, what I'm trying to acknowledge is it did use the sound as a trope in a strange way, but it worked. It was like they knew how to hit the emotional buttons on a scene and go, Gosling's feeling, whoa, shake, and then mic drop that shit, boom, and then let the theater be quiet. And even like when you go to I was like equated to when you go to a music festival and you're like listening to electronic music or something, the DJ's like building, and yeah, you could argue that it's a superficial thing that the DJ does over and over again, build up, bass drop, or use that little shh. Let the crowd simmer out. Let the hairs on your arms stand up. But it takes the best DJs to do it well. And I felt like the director and Zimmer did an amazing job. And Zimmer is one of my favorite directors. But the past few years, I've gotten so sick and tired of him just kind of replicating the same process. This wasn't Dark Knight. This wasn't Inception. It was the best of what he knew how to use those tools, and he's using them in a very Blade Runner way. Not even bringing in the original Blade Runner score till the very end of the movie, tying Gosling in a little bit into Deckard. I felt like there were things that were done, like you said, if they missed the narrative, that's one thing. Maybe it wasn't the final version of the script, but it was enough for me to feel it all the way through, and I didn't feel like I was being detached. I felt like I was constantly their point A to B. Like I've talked to John Cahill about like, yeah, there was a little bit too much traveling from point A to point B, and a lot of the narrative was about getting the person from this next stage to the next stage. But I guess maybe for me being a very visual person, how they did it was so good that I was lost in the world. I didn't know that 3 hours had gone by. I felt it a little bit right in the third act. I was like, oh, this has been a while. But then, soon as the seawall fight kicked in, I was bad. I was like, there was a moment where I was like, and then I was right back in it. Yeah. So that's my argument, is that the movie made me feel a certain way, and all I can argue is it wasn't the same as the first Blade Runner. The first Blade Runner makes me feel a certain way, and sometimes just feeling is what I'm looking for. in a film. And now I can later on go in and be like, oh, I'm going to pick this apart. But I don't think in any way is it a bad movie. But I don't. We're just like,
yeah, I think that the original Blade Runner is never necessarily telling you how to feel, though.
No, it's not. It's not.
I think that there's something to be said for counterpoint. You know, sometimes where the music doesn't necessarily match what's going on, and the first Blade Runner does have those moments where it matches exactly. But if that's, I guess that's really the only argument that I would make, is that it's narratively, it's not where it should be.
Right.
If someone argues that they're not in it for the narrative, that I totally understand, or they think that the atmosphere was the most important aspect of it. It's like I think the director did a pretty good job with imbuing it with an atmosphere that felt like Blade Runner, but something new, something more organic. Like,
I think what they were trying to say is that, like,
and the bugs,
Blade Runner, the world gets worse. I think that what it's trying to tell you is that a cyberpunk, the first Blade Runner, I will say this, as tough as the society is, you kind of feel very like, I would like to go there. Mm-hmm. And in this Blade Runner, you get a little bit more of a sense of like dread, like maybe I don't want to live in that future. Right. And so it's like, it's like 30-something years out. But yeah, that's how I kind of...
there's almost something more like, I would say, Orwellian. Like, even more than the first one. The first one feels more free.
It does.
Even though it's a depressed society, it feels more changed by climate change and technology. But in this movie, it almost feels like the government or the corporate state has more of a control over everything.
Yeah, it does.
So those aspects of it, I think, are good. I just think that.
So you didn't like the joy aspect. You thought it was like short lived. It wasn't like really fleshed out like her.
No, well, I mean, it's basically one of two things. It's like that's either its own movie or you tone it way the hell down. Because basically, here's my problem with a lot of these movies and a lot of these scenes is that they're going 60 miles to get you to the closest Burger King.
Right.
You didn't need to go that far. Why didn't you just take a right on Venice?
So you didn't like the scene with the quasi threesome with the girl with physical and then.
Well, I mean, in and of itself, that's an interesting scene. It's like shot interestingly, and it's a scene as a vignette. It's okay.
Right.
But where does this character go? It's that I was talking about earlier about that idea of like the movie's basically cheating. Because if the idea of her character is that she is not really sentient, right?
Yeah.
And it's really how he sees her. It's a comment on
She's
him.
his dream.
Right, but that's the thing. There are moments, like when he gets knocked out in the car.
Yeah.
When she screams,
I agree.
love
These
you.
are the same things. Yeah.
This is the problem. They're basically... My point is that they're cheating. They're writing the character that is sentient, but when they want to, they flip the switch, and then they're like, but it's ironic.
But
she's not sentient.
Here's what they're really doing. They're trying. Here's what I would say. What I think they were trying to do.
Yeah.
They're trying to set it up so that you can ask the question: is she sentient?
See, but this
or is she serve case
right,
purpose?
Right. And
my point.
So if you're gonna make that point, here's my version of that.
Okay.
Right? She's the serving thing, right?
Uh-huh.
She always speaks like Hal 9000,
right?
She's serving him dinner. She's basically Alexa. And then one time she says something, and it makes you think, wait a second.
Yeah.
That's the better version. Not the version where she essentially is sentient, and then when they want to, they just flip the switch and she's not. It's an underbaked idea. And it's so underbaked that it's either, my note on that version of the script would be, you either make this the whole movie, or you tone it way the hell down.
Right.
A little bit of this goes a long way.
Right.
You've put so much of this in here, it's either its own movie, or you're not actually answering your own questions. Or you're not even asking the right questions. No, but you're not asking the right questions, because if she's essentially sentient for most of the film, and then she's not because you put her in it too much, it's not asking the right questions. You're not really asking the question right. Even the question that I think people are bringing to their own minds, which is, oh, is she sentient? Is she not? They're actually not asking that question. They think they are, but they're not. And another draft of that script would help them to realize, okay, actually, let's do a draft where we cut this way the hell down. That's where development, the importance of development.
See, for me, Joy is a part of the film from the very opening. Joy, for me, is a reflection in all of the representation of female characters, whether they be the holograms that are living in between the buildings, the advertisements of the woman that are, the advertisements of her actually that we see. I think that they represent this idea, especially for a noir-like male character. That's why some people were saying the movie was kind of like, was like chauvinist. But no, it's the character's a male character seeking his identity as this male in society. Even as a replicant, that's what's interesting, is even as a replicant, he's being marketed love. And therefore, he's seeking it. Now, it doesn't mean that just because he's looking for it doesn't mean that the AI that he bought isn't becoming aware. For all I know, there could be another Joy somewhere becoming aware. Because I'm sure there's not one replicant. All the replicants didn't become aware. There's not just one. It's not like an Adam and Eve replicant. It could just be that the AI is evolving, and for some people starting to be that. Or it could just be that she represents. So, like I said, for me, these questions that I'm posing means that it worked for me.
Right.
I guess. But like, I guess.
What I would say is, again, that's its own movie. Because these are the same questions, the same like genre of questions that you'd be asking about Roy in the first movie.
Right, but
he's the whole story in the first movie.
But I feel like I asked more of those questions about Deckard when we watched the whole movie. Maybe it's because time is going on and people tend to ask more of those questions.
Well, either way, my point is that you're dealing with two people who are the focus of the movie.
So here's why she becomes
She's
the focus.
not the focus of the movie. The movie is. It's got ADHD.
She can be the focus in a strange way. The art is that what I think the sleight of hand, the magic trick, is that she is because see, Deckard emotes a little bit better in the first movie because whether he's a replicant or not, he believes he's human. Because Kay doesn't know or knows that he's a replicant, but kind of wants to be human. Like she says it for him. She even like speaks his own talk because. She says you could be a real boy. Like it's the Pinocchio idea. He knows he's fake. He wants to be real. She speaks his thoughts for him because she's the AI that he spends most of his time with.
Right, and this is
so in a strange way, the problem is not. It's not about her. For me, it's a little bit of both. She is the representation of Kay's character on screen, so she's just as important. She is vital to the movie for me.
This is overwriting. See, this is the problem. This is the problem. She's basically the screenwriter talking.
Maybe.
And there's a lot of that in the movie with other
But now it's also interesting that you're probably going to hate this too, but her name is Joy. He's always looking for joy.
Yeah.
He's always being marketed joy. But love is a little different.
I mean,
love is cold.
I would have not.
And love kills joy. Love is the android that works for Wallace.
I don't see how
fucking dumb.
I don't see how anything of what you're spinning is not better served by ratcheting back on that character.
Right.
I think you could say everything you want to say with this right here, everything you're spinning, by going either, again, it's the whole movie.
Removing Deckard and all that and just focusing on...
Yeah, I think everything you're talking about is interesting.
But then it's also about...
But
it's also about what makes Kay so interesting to me in the movie is that he wants to be a part of the... This is why I didn't like the whole... I call it the Matrix scene. When the androids stepped forward from the dark. And while that was a cool subtext, I was like, I've seen that. That's what the future is always supposed to hold. There's always supposed to be this underground rebellion, living in the sewers, ready with a Morpheus, ready to like. I didn't like that. That was the one part I was like, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me right now. But where it served its purpose was that, for me, I guess I really related to Kay. I felt like I was like, man, he really wants this purpose. We all want to be bigger than we are. We all want to. He wanted to be Neo, so he's kind of like his search. What's actually motivating him in this quest is not the murder mystery; it's the fact that it could be him. You know, and he could actually be the guy that has the girl. He could actually be the guy that is special.
To my problem of really. This is another problem with modern film. This is what I talked about this when we were chatting with Cahill about it. The sort of Harry Potterization of everything. One thing that
in Harry Potter, he is the person.
I know. Well,
okay.
I'll get to
stop.
I'll get to my point.
I'm jumping in. Go ahead.
What the original Blade Runner very much is not it's not the Carl Jungian, Joseph Campbell, Luke Skywalker hero story.
Right.
It's
absolutely
not. Right.
Yes.
One thing I read from a screenwriter, he wrote a blog post recently. I think it was actually a couple of years ago, and he said consistently the note that he gets from producers and executives when he's writing is there needs to be a destiny. There needs to be a hero's journey. This person needs to be special. And one of the things I was really afraid of when I saw the trailers for Blade Runner 2049 is they had this like open book with pages torn out. And there was dialogue that I actually think's not in the movie. Because sometimes they have dialogue that's just in the trailer. She's like, "You're special. I told you your story isn't finished." This to me is actually the greatest crime, and I actually think it's sort of like it's the corruption in the code of this movie that ruins everything. Okay. And it's starting from this idea of... Okay, so I have a philosophy about sequels where in the sequel, you have to turn the mythology of the original movie on its head. Okay. Like The Empire Strikes Back says, yeah, you destroyed a Death Star, but that's not what makes you great. Finding your inner person is what makes you great. Right? So, because of that, some stories can't afford to have the mythology turned on its head. They don't. There's no room for it. It doesn't work. And so when you force a sequel onto something, which I would say Blade Runner is one of those movies that absolutely does not need a sequel.
I'm not saying it needs a sequel.
All right,
I agree,
but here's my point.
Agree.
Here's my point, though.
Okay.
So you sit down and write that movie, right? And you're like, okay, what do we say that's different from the first movie? How do we flip that on its head, right? How do we do Terminator 2, where it's a machine might not destroy humanity, it can actually learn to be human. You know, that flip. Well, with this one, what they decided to do was Harry Potterize it. Oh, Deckard, do you think it was a coincidence that you met Rachel?
I saw that differently than the way you did. But
we can argue about that. But my point is that, like, there's an immaculate conception, essentially. There's all this talk.
Or is it?
But still, you're bringing into Blade Runner something that does not fit, which is this idea of destiny and spirituality.
It does because
it fit the Blade Runner world.
Well, here's where I disagree with you. Because in any world, whenever you watch the first episode of a world, I don't care what it was. Let's say if we make a TV show and it takes place in ancient Rome, and we make it all about how the world is brutal and it is what it is, and you die, and we just accurately depict it. Yeah. Someone in ancient Rome, in that world, saw the world differently. Right. Because the more you expand on the world, what you realize is that there are realistic humans in it. They all see it differently. In this world that we even live in, where the way you see the world is not necessarily the way I see the world. Mm-hmm. Which means that stories can be told within the world. That's what makes Star Wars so great. You can tell.
But that doesn't mean that's the right thing to do to Blade Runner.
It doesn't mean it's not the right thing. It just doesn't mean that it can't be done when you're.
It can be done.
But
here's
here's what it doesn't do wrong.
Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
But here's what I disagree with you so seriously, that when you do it and you make it the answer, when you say it is an immaculate conception, that's wrong. When you say, is it an immaculate conception? How do you see it?
Hold on. This is where where the movie's cheating.
Cheating?
Yes. Okay. This is where the movie's cheating. It wants to have its cake and eat it too. Because honestly, you could at the end of the day say, "Oh, it's posing those questions, but it's not actually going into them." Yeah. But I would argue that functionally, on a story structure level and how the pieces are moving and where people are getting to, it's just acting out the hero's journey. It's acting out all of those ideas that you would take into something like Harry Potter or Star Wars.
I would argue that in the first movie, for example, Roy is acting out. It's what's cool about it though is that because we're posed to think that the way I look at the movie now that I've watched the final cut, I don't see Deckard as much of a good guy. Right. He's just kind of lost.
He's not a hero.
He's just trying to do his job.
He might be the protagonist, but he's not a hero.
He's not a hero. Yeah. And Roy is like, he's on this journey, but interestingly enough, he thinks he's more special than he is. Yeah. He thinks he could be the one to get more life. He could be the one to live forever. He could be the one to change it for his people, for the people that are around him. But at the end of the day, he gets the reality, and he settles on his reality. And that's what I love about it. Yeah. And by settling on his reality and dying, that's how we are as humans. As he dies, he passes something to Deckard that allows Deckard to see the world just a little differently and move on. In Blade Runner 2049, what I think happens is that, yes, the movie is posed to be the hero's journey because as much as yes, from a studio standpoint it is, if I'm gonna have to eat the steel, I'm definitely gonna see it through the character. And for me, the character sees the hero's journey. He's seeing the hero's journey for himself, therefore he's trying to make it.
Yeah.
And then slowly as he's unraveling it, it's not his story. And he has to resign. What I love about the end of the movie is he has to resign to be happy with he still has he has to just be happy with he had a purpose. And his purpose is he's not the hero, someone else is, and he passes the story along, but he did play his part. And I think that moment when he lays back and he looks at the sky is a moment of like, hey, I'm content with what I did and why I was here, and I'm happy with that. And I thought that was awesome. I think even the moment when Joy, like he sees the version of her that's just the advertisement, which some people could say like just clearly says she's not real. It says she served. Which if that's the case, makes all the stuff that we saw make a lot of sense because it's all about him searching for this thing that he can't have. And he goes, you know what? I am a replicant. After she says, hi, boy, and she has the black eyes. They're cold. She goes, oh, you won't come be with me? And she goes, kind of stands back up. He pulls out his blaster and he looks at it like, this is my purpose. This is what I was always made for. Fuck it. That's it. And in a strange way, it's cold. At that moment, all those arguments you're saying, it's not the hero's journey. You could say, because that's his purpose, but he's no longer the Neo. He's not, the hero. He's not Hercules.
Honestly, he functionally is, because if you boil it down...
If he doesn't show up and save Harrison Ford...
If you boil it down, it's like, okay, so what is... That moment with Joy is what, in the film structure world, what they call the Dark Night of the Soul, right?
Yeah.
And then he realizes what he has to go do, which is to break into Act 3. It's just the hero story. So